today's video, I want to go over something that you very well know I am absolutely addicted to and love: pedals. Pedals are my favorite thing about music production. More specifically, one of my favorite types of pedals are distortion, overdrive, and fuzz. And in today's video, I'm going to go over not only how they came to be in the history of overdrive, fuzz, and distortion pedals, and why they were even created in the first place and who created them, or at least which companies took the leap to try and make it a standard in recording. For as long as modern recording and music has been a thing, people have been trying to distort their guitar signal in some sort of way. Now, what does distortion even mean when it comes to a guitar signal or any signal? What does distortion mean? Well, distortion and overdrive are typically achieved by an excess gain in a guitar signal and volume. Now, gain is not just volume when it comes to recording, and it's very, very confusing to put into words what gain is. A lot of people say it is just volume, but volume is amplitude. It is how loud the signal is. But that is not what gain only is. It is the volume, it is the amount of the signal flow, it is the amount of the signal that is present throughout the rest of the recording. So distortion was typically achieved by high gain on amplifiers. What really helped achieve this distortion effect are tube amplifiers, which have vacuum and power tubes inside of them, which the signal flows through. I'm going to describe this in much more detail very soon and how the signal changes throughout the amplifier, but there was one big issue when it comes to studio recording with tube amplifiers and gaining distortion from those amplifiers only, because that was the only way of getting distortion at one point. Now, in the early 1940s through 50s, guitar players were the leading experimentation when it comes to music, especially electric guitar players. They were not trying to stick to their roots. They were trying to go outside of the box to the furthest extent. But they found that turning the gain so high on a tube amp would get volume to a dangerous level where it could break the amp or the tubes inside of them. You'd have to replace the tube because of how hot they would get from that signal flow. That electrical current coming out of the guitar and being amped would burn the tubes out. This would get very expensive, especially for upcoming musicians who started from nothing, literally nothing. They built some of these amps themselves. And not only that, but mixing engineers found that effect very unwanted because the guitar would overtake the rest of the mix because of how loud it was. It was so hard to contain that volume and gain when you're mixing other instruments in it. Because you would literally just put a microphone in front of this amplifier, and reducing the volume would get rid of the distortion, or at least defeat the purpose of distorting it in general. You add the gain and then gain reduce. The guitarists were trying to achieve this tone in any way possible while making it feasible for production and selling their music, not just performing live. A very well-known guitarist named Willie Kizart went into the studio to record his song Rocket 88, and through the transportation of that amplifier to the studio, he damaged it unknowingly. His faulty tube amp would give off a buzzing sound, and it gave a tone that he actually enjoyed, and he never fixed it. So what did guitarists do when they heard about this damage doing some good? They literally started opening their amps and breaking them, causing this buzzing noise that would either work out or destroy your amp. In 1961, Grady Martin used one of his broken amps to ironically name his instrumental song The Fuzz, due to the guitar's fuzzy tone. Just about a year later, Gibson, they released the first commercially produced fuzz pedal called the Maestro Fuzz Tone. What I mean by commercially produced is that you didn't have to break your amp to get this tone. You could just go buy this device and then still turn it off and have a clean amp tone without a broken amp. Tube amplifiers can still get distortion to this day without breaking, and those are Marshall amps are known for their tube distortion, as well as Vox. Vox knows what they're doing when it comes to tube amps. This kind of distortion is organic distortion. You don't need any additives. It's just the pure power of the amplifier turning that guitar signal into a distorted signal, which I will get into again. Where it really changed was Jimi Hendrix and his arsenal of pedals, one of them being the very famous now Dallas Arbiter Fuzz Face. Everybody knows the Fuzz Face. Without fuzz and distortion, genres such as heavy rock, heavy metal, Anything past that limit would be infeasible, either on a recording aspect or on a price aspect for some of these bands. They did not have the money to continuously change tubes or running the risk of breaking multiple amps just for tone. Now, the 1970s saw a massive rise in distortion and overdrive popularity. I will tell you the difference of distortion, overdrive, and fuzz and the actual signal difference. But of course, renowned company Boss and MXR, they came out with their distortion and overdrive pedals such as the Blues Driver and the DS1. Two pedals which I religiously use and love every day. We can't forget the 80s with the Proco Rat, one of the best distortion circuits of all time. But as technology advanced, chips and digital effects were very easy to get your hands on and produce. They attempt to replicate these analog effects, but nothing can really get that pure distortion and, as we referred to, organic distortion. These pedals came to be so that you don't have to break your amps or be in a unsuitable environment for recording to get that tone. You can now go into a studio and throw on some pedals and have that amazing tone that you want for your aggressive song or that solo, and still leave room for your drum set to fit in the mix, along with a vocalist or a sax player, depending on what kind of band you're in. And now people throw pedals on synthesizers and even mixes through interfaces such as snare drums. A lot of people throw fuzz on snare drums. It's fantastic. But now I want to get into the actual technical aspect of what these pedals do to the wave, from the guitar output into the amplifier through that chain. I will start with the different types of volume pedals, and then I'll show you what I mean by organic tube distortion. A typical clean sine wave that comes out of your guitar will look like this. They're extremely vertical and symmetrical and clean. There is no clipping at all, and what I mean by clipping is the change in the signal. No matter what, the only thing that would change is volume by the duration of the note, as well as pitch and tuning and other things like that, depending on the string type and the quality of the guitar. Now, if we were to run this sine wave coming from the guitar into a fuzz pedal, such as the fuzz face, the wave would look like this. This wave is what you would call hard clipping. What I mean by that, it is not round on the edges. It is sharp drop-offs, almost like a square wave that you would see on a synthesizer. And that is the characteristic of a fuzz. It's very, very electric and synth-like. What you will also see is asymmetrical clipping, which in this instance, the negative part of the wave, the lower part of the wave, is thin and long, and the upper positive part of the wave is wide and different shapes on each side. It's asymmetrical clipping. Now moving to the overdrive. If we run a sine wave coming out of our guitar through an overdrive, the wave would look like this. As you can see, it's a far less dramatic change. It looks pretty much like a sine wave, except one thing. The amplitude. The waves are far taller and closer together. This is the drive. It gives it a push. One characteristic that is different from a fuzz, though, is that, as you can see, it is a symmetrical clip. The up is exactly symmetrical to the down. And it's soft clipping. It's still got the round edge to the wave. It's not changing the shape of the wave too much compared to a fuzz signal. The way this is done in pedals is either through digital boards such as PCBs, or some people will make pedals out of tubes just to have the tubes change the signal in this certain way by exaggerating certain aspects of the signal, such as the amplitude or the clipping. Now finally, and the most dramatic change, is distortion, which looks like this. Now, distortion is not only hard clipping by changing the shape of the wave drastically, it looks like a sawtooth wave from a synthesizer, which it has the same characteristic as a fuzz if you really crank the distortion level. And another thing you will see is that the wave is actually curving on one end and dropping on the other. It is a rising and falling sawtooth. It is a fast wave. The most aggressive in this instance, and if you take a close look, as you can see, it looks like a fuzz and an overdrive mixed together, except it is curving. It is far more hard clipped, and that is the characteristic of an overdrive. Another characteristic of the overdrive is it is hard clipping, but it is also symmetrical clipping. The rise is the exact same as the fall, and it makes it very, very linear. Finally, when it comes to organic distortion, which is really my favorite, I love tube and analog stuff. In this diagram I have created, which I will make bigger for you to be able to see, a guitar is not an amplification device, it is an output device. So beginning with the guitar's pickups, which essentially are just microphones under the strings, they're magnets, and going through the guitar's volume output, the wave stays the same. It is not an amplifying device. But in a tube amplifier, there is a preamp tube, and that amplifies the signal. It will raise the amplitude such as an overdrive, and it will go into the master volume of the amp, which will bring it to a controllable level. You can reduce this gain. But finally, the power tube is what really gives it the kick. It will distort it, and as you can see on the bottom wave, which I've drawn, if you really crank the power tube, it will bend the wave just as a distortion pedal would, and that is the beauty of analog overdrive and distortion. It's a full chain of events. It's not just a board that does it for you or a digitized overdrive. It is you molding that wave. It is you changing that physical attribute of that sound. Okay, well, it's not really you doing it, but you are making that process happen. I absolutely love overdrive, distortion, and fuzz, and you can layer these. I'm going to make a full video on layering overdrive and distortion as well as fuzz. But in any case, before then, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you found it very interesting as I do, or at least informative to see how far this technology has come and the actual experimentation that goes on within it, such as breaking your own amps for the sake of tone. I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I thank you for watching as always. I really do appreciate it. Go check out the last video that I posted Tuesday about key signature calculation. It is really, really developmental, and you will learn something new, I promise. I really do love you all. You do make me want to make more videos. It's not the fact that I make videos, it's that I can make videos for you guys to watch. And I love that. I love being able to share my mind with you, or at least what I find interesting. I will see you guys in the next one on Tuesday or maybe even Saturday.